Beneath the surface, I had spent years building a life with Emily, 8 years of devotion, trust, and the kind of love I thought was unbreakable. Then, in a single moment, it all unraveled. It started with a feeling, that gut-wrenching instinct that something was off. Emily's laughter, once so natural, now felt forced. Her phone, always within reach, now never left her side. And then, the late nights, the unexplained absences. So I did what any rational man would do. I investigated, and what I found shattered me. She was cheating. Not just a one-time mistake, but a full-blown affair. With him. A man I never would have suspected. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I played along, acting as the devoted husband, while I meticulously planned her downfall. She had underestimated me. By the time she realized what I had done, it was too late, beneath the surface. I didn't react immediately when I confirmed Emily was cheating. Confrontation would have been too easy, too merciful. Instead, I decided to let the truth unfold on my terms, in my way. I started small. A private investigator was too obvious, too impersonal. So I became my own detective. I combed through her social media, checked her credit card statements, and subtly questioned her about her late nights. I watched her body language, the way she hesitated before answering, the way she clutched her phone a little tighter. Then I followed her. It was a Tuesday evening when I first saw them together. She told me she was working late. In reality, she was meeting him, Nathan Caldwell, a man I knew well, my so-called best friend. They sat in the corner of a dimly lit restaurant, their heads close, hands brushing. I felt rage coil in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I took pictures, recorded videos, and logged every detail. Evidence, proof. The next step was finding out how deep this betrayal went. I broke into Emily's laptop while she slept. Her password? Our wedding date. The irony burned. Emails. Hundreds of them. Messages full of whispered secrets, plans, and the worst part, mockery. He has no idea, Nathan had written. God, the way he looks at me. Still thinking I'm his loving wife, Emily had replied. When are you going to tell him? Not yet. Let me milk this a little longer. He's so pathetic. I clenched my fists. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was malicious, calculated. That's when I knew. A simple divorce wasn't enough. She didn't deserve a clean break. She deserved ruin. The plan begins. I started laying the groundwork. Financial ruin. Emily had no idea, but our joint assets were slowly shifting. I moved funds, liquidated investments, and reallocated resources under my name. When the dust settled, she'd be left with nothing. Social destruction. I gathered all the evidence, screenshots, messages, photos. I created an anonymous email account and drafted a carefully crafted package. It would be sent to everyone in our social circle. Her friends, family, colleagues. Nathan's downfall. Nathan worked for a high-profile law firm with a strict morality clause. If word got out about his affair with a married woman, especially one he mocked in writing, his career would be over. I prepared a dossier of every piece of dirt I had on him, the ultimate trap. But this wasn't enough. I wanted to see them break, to watch their perfect little fantasy crumble, and so I set my final trap. The perfect betrayal. Emily had no idea I knew. She still kissed me in the morning, still sent me texts pretending to be the loving wife. So I played along. I suggested a romantic getaway, a cabin in the mountains, just the two of us. She hesitated at first, but I pressed, played the doting husband, made her believe I was clueless. What she didn't know was that I had invited Nathan, too. Not directly, of course. A fake text sent from her phone, a carefully planted message about a surprise waiting for him at the cabin. Nathan, the fool, took the bait. That weekend, Emily and I arrived at the cabin, a remote, isolated retreat where no one would hear what was about to unfold. And then Nathan showed up. The look on her face when she saw him standing in the doorway was priceless. He froze. She stammered. I smiled. "Surprise?" I said. She tried to lie, to spin some excuse, but I held up my phone and played their own words back to them. The recordings, the messages, their laughter at my expense. Emily's face turned ghostly pale. Nathan stammered something about not meaning it. And then I destroyed them. I revealed every card I had been holding. The financial ruin, the social disgrace, Nathan's career-ending scandal. Emily collapsed to her knees. "Please," she whispered, "we can fix this." I laughed. "Fix this?" "No, Emily. This is your mess now." And then I walked away, leaving them in the wreckage of the life they thought they had stolen from me. But the best part? That was only the beginning. Beneath the Surface, Part 3, The Ultimate Revenge. The anonymous message changed everything. I had been satisfied watching Emily and Nathan's lives crumble. Watching her lose everything, seeing him spiral into self-destruction, that was enough. Or so I thought, but the recording I received? That changed the game. I don't just want to leave him. I want him ruined, financially, emotionally. I want him to suffer. He'll never see it coming. Emily's voice, cold, calculated. I thought she had betrayed me because of lust or boredom. But this was premeditated. She had planned to destroy me. I needed to find out why. And I needed to make sure she suffered in ways she couldn't even imagine. The investigation. The message came from an untraceable number. Whoever sent it didn't want to be found. Yet. I started digging. Emily's secrets. I hacked into her cloud storage. Deleted messages, hidden folders, financial records. It wasn't just an affair. There were money transfers, large amounts, being funneled into an offshore account. Why? Nathan's involvement. I visited Nathan's old law office, had a casual drink with one of his former colleagues. Turns out Nathan was handling some very shady cases. Money laundering, fraud, and corporate sabotage. Was Emily part of it? The third player. Someone else was involved. Someone who knew Emily was planning my downfall. But who and why warn me? Then I found it. Buried in Emily's deleted emails was a message. From unknown. Sender subject confirming. Our agreement. Once he's out of the picture, you'll receive the final transfer. Make sure everything looks like his fault. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse steady. Emily wasn't just planning to leave me. She was setting me up to take the fall for something big. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with a woman willing to destroy me for money, and I was going to make her regret it. Setting the trap, Emily was still reeling from her public disgrace. Homeless, unemployed, abandoned. She was desperate. I decided to use that. I called her. "We need to talk." She hesitated, then agreed. We met at a small cafe, a neutral place. She looked different, tired, worn down, but there was still something in her eyes. Scheming, I played my role. "I've been thinking," I said, sipping my coffee. "Maybe we can fix this." Her eyes widened. "You mean?" I nodded. "I just want to understand why." She sighed, putting on the remorseful act. "I made mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you." Liar. "I need to know everything," I pressed. "No more secrets." She hesitated. Then slowly she started talking, feeding me bits and pieces of the truth. She didn't realize I was recording every word. The final move, I spent the next week piecing together the full puzzle. Emily had teamed up with someone powerful. She had been promised money, security, a new life, as long as I was out of the way. She had forged documents, fabricated debts in my name, planted evidence of fraud. She wanted to frame me, and then she would disappear with the money. Too bad. For her, I was always one step ahead. The reckoning, I compiled everything. The recordings, the emails, the financial records. Then I sent a single email to FBI Financial Crimes. Division subject, evidence of fraud and conspiracy. I made sure the authorities had everything. Then I made sure Emily's mystery partner received a little message too. A warning that Emily had double-crossed them. By the time the police raided her motel room, she was completely blindsided, arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Nathan, too, dragged into the mess he thought he had escaped. And her partner? I never found out exactly who it was. But I knew one thing. Emily had been playing with fire, and now she was going to burn. The aftermath I stood outside the courthouse the day Emily was sentenced. She caught my eye as they led her away in cuffs. There was no love left between us. No anger. Just emptiness. She had tried to destroy me, and in the end, she had only destroyed herself. As for me, I walked away a free man, a stronger man. And as I stepped out into the sunlight, I knew one thing for sure. I had won. Beneath the surface, epilogue, the last twist. I thought it was over. Emily was in prison. Nathan, too. Their betrayal had been avenged, their downfall complete. I should have felt closure, satisfaction. But life has a way of reminding you that revenge is never truly the end, only a doorway to something else. One final message. 2 weeks after Emily's sentencing, I received an unmarked envelope. No return address, no handwriting, just a small black USB drive inside. I hesitated before plugging it into my laptop. The file inside was labeled simply, "Watch me." I clicked. The screen flickered, and then Emily. She was sitting in an interrogation room, looking gaunt but eerily calm. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't a cop. No uniform, no badge. Just a black suit and a slow, deliberate smile. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth. "You made a deal with us." She glared at him but said nothing. "We held up our end. You were supposed to deliver. Instead, you got caught." A flicker of fear crossed her face. "Do you know what happens to people who waste our time?" the man continued. Emily swallowed. "I can fix this," she whispered. "Just give me time." The man leaned in, smiling like a wolf. "You don't have any." The screen went black. Then a single line of text appeared. She thought she could betray us. She was wrong. My blood ran cold. Whoever Emily had been working with wasn't finished. And now, I wasn't sure if I was safe either. A shadow in the mirror. That night, I double-checked the locks on my doors, installed extra security cameras. But the feeling didn't go away. That creeping sensation that someone was watching. The next morning, I walked outside to grab my mail. Inside my mailbox was a single playing card, the ace of spades, and written on it in neat, precise handwriting. "You weren't the only one planning revenge." I clenched my fists, scanning the street. No sign of anyone, but I knew, deep in my gut, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The real game was just beginning to be continued. Beneath the surface. Part 4. The game isn't over. I stared at the playing card, my pulse steady, but my mind racing. You weren't the only one planning revenge. It wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration. Whoever Emily had been working with wasn't finished. And if they thought they could come after me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. A visit from the past. I knew better than to ignore a message like this. So instead of waiting for the next move, I made one of my own. There was only one person who might have answers. Nathan. He was locked up awaiting trial. His former colleagues had abandoned him, his name now synonymous with corruption. But there was one thing about men like Nathan. When faced with real danger, they cracked. I arranged a visit. When he walked into the visitor's room, he looked like hell, unkempt, thinner, a nervous tick in his jaw. He sat down across from me, forcing a smirk. "Didn't expect to see you here. Come to gloat?" I slid the playing card across the table. Who else was Emily working with? Nathan's smirk disappeared. His fingers hesitated before picking up the card. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. "Where did you get this?" "In my mailbox." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Shit, Nathan." My voice was calm, but firm. "Who are they?" For a moment, he didn't answer. His fingers tapped against the table. Then, finally, "You're in trouble," he muttered. "Emily wasn't just playing games. She got in bed with people who don't forgive mistakes." I leaned forward. "Names?" Nathan shook his head. "I don't know exactly who's at the top. I never met them. But there's a name you should look into. Victor Holloway." I'd never heard of him. "Who is he?" "A fixer, a middleman. He connects powerful people who want things done. Quietly. If you got that card, it means someone doesn't like loose ends." I processed that. Emily was supposed to deliver me to them, wasn't she? Nathan's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I stood. "Thanks for your time, Nathan." As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "If I were you," he said quietly, "I'd disappear." I didn't turn around. "I'm not you. The first move, Victor Holloway." I had a name. Now I needed more. I started digging, discreetly, and what I found was unsettling. Victor Holloway wasn't a businessman. He wasn't in any official records. But whispers about him? They painted a picture of a ghost who pulled strings in the shadows. Corporate fraud, blackmail, disappearances. People who crossed him either vanished or wished they had. Emily had been playing with fire. And now, that fire was looking for me. A warning too late. The first real sign that I was being watched came 3 nights later. I had just come home from meeting an old contact, a former FBI cyber analyst who had helped me scrape together data on Holloway. Nothing concrete, but enough to confirm that he was more than just a name. I pulled into my driveway, scanning my surroundings. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed it. My front door was unlocked. I always locked it. Always. I slipped my gun from the glove compartment and moved cautiously, my every sense on high alert. Inside, nothing looked out of place until I reached my office. Sitting on my desk was a single sheet of paper, 4 words, typed in a simple font: "Walk away." Last chance. A slow, cold anger settled in my chest. They wanted me scared. They wanted me gone. But I don't scare easy. I picked up the paper, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. Then, I turned on my computer and started planning my next move. If Victor Holloway wanted me out of the game, he was about to learn. I never fold. To be continued. Beneath the surface. Part 5. Striking back. They thought they could intimidate me, breaking into my home, leaving threats, making sure I knew they were watching. But they'd made one mistake. They had shown their hand too soon. I wasn't going to run. I was going to hunt. A ghost in the system. Victor Holloway wasn't a man you found in Google searches, but I had someone on my side. Aaron, a cyber analyst who owed me a favor. He used to work for the FBI before he got burned for digging too deep into the wrong people. When I called him, his response was immediate. "You sure you want to do this?" "I don't have a choice." A pause, then a sigh. "All right. Give me an hour." I waited, poured myself a drink, stared at the crumpled warning note still sitting in my trash. Then my phone buzzed. Aaron's voice was tense. "I found something." Go on. Holloway doesn't exist in any legal records, but his name keeps showing up in connection with offshore accounts, shell corporations, and... He hesitated. And what? A hitman. I sat up. What do you mean? Aaron exhaled sharply. There's a known fixer named Elias Cade, ex-Special Forces. Operates in the dark. Expensive. He doesn't take jobs unless they're personal. And I just found an encrypted message sent from one of Holloway's accounts to an alias linked to Cade. I didn't need Aaron to spell it out. Victor Holloway hadn't just sent me a warning, he had sent someone to eliminate me. Turning the tables, I had two options: run, not a chance, or make the hunter the hunted. Elias Cade was dangerous, but no one was untouchable. If I could find out where he was operating from, I could set a trap of my own. Aaron hesitated when I told him my plan. You're playing a dangerous game, man, I smirked. It's only dangerous if I lose. The setup I needed bait. Holloway and Cade thought I was still in the dark. That gave me an advantage. I sent a message to an old contact, someone who dealt in information. A fixer, but one with no loyalty to Holloway. 12 hours later, I had what I needed. Cade had been spotted in the city, a hotel downtown, high floor, private security detail. I made my move. The confrontation, it was midnight when I entered the hotel. A stolen keycard got me access to the penthouse floor. Gun in hand, I moved quietly down the hall, stopping outside Cade's suite. Then I knocked. Long silence. Then the door unlocked, I stepped inside. Cade was waiting, seated in a leather chair. He was calm. Too calm. You're either very brave, he said, or very stupid. I smiled. A little of both. His eyes flicked to my gun. You planning to shoot me? I shook my head. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding. A pause, then a low chuckle. All right. I'll bite. What do you want? I sat across from him. A deal. His eyebrow arched. I don't make deals with targets. You do when the job is a setup. That got his attention. I leaned in. Holloway sent you after me, but he didn't tell you everything. I've got dirt on him, a lot of dirt. Cade studied me. And I know for a fact that he's already making backup plans. He's covering his tracks, which means when you're done with me, you'll be next. A flicker of something crossed his face. Doubt. I pressed forward. I can prove it, but if you take me out, you'll never see it coming when Holloway decides. You're a loose end. Silence. Then Cade leaned back, thoughtful. You've got balls. I'll give you that. He exhaled, then smirked. All right. I'll hear you out. The next move, I had just done the impossible. I had turned Holloway's own weapon against him. Now it was time to end this. Because if Holloway thought he could erase me from the board, he was about to find out that I played to win. To be continued. Beneath the surface. Part 6. The real enemy. I had done something few had ever managed. I'd convinced Elias Cade, a man who made his living eliminating problems, that I wasn't the problem. But that didn't mean I trusted him. He was still dangerous, still capable of snapping my neck in the blink of an eye. And as I sat across from him in that dimly lit penthouse, I saw something in his eyes. Not doubt, not fear, calculation. He was weighing his options. I had to make sure he chose my side. The truth about Holloway. You said you have proof, Cade said, his voice level. Let's see it. I slid a flash drive across the table. Aaron pulled this from encrypted files linked to Holloway's shell corporations. Bank transactions, offshore accounts, money moving in and out of places that don't officially exist. Cade plugged the drive into his laptop, his expression unreadable as he scrolled through the data. Then he stopped, his jaw clenched. Son of a bitch. I leaned forward. You see it, don't you? He didn't answer right away, but when he looked at me again, something had changed. You were right, he muttered. Holloway isn't just tying up loose ends. He's cleaning house. I had suspected as much, but I needed to hear it from him. How many jobs have you done for him? I asked. Cade hesitated. Then, too many. And how many of those people were really threats to him? Silence. Then a slow, humorless chuckle. You're enjoying this, aren't you? A little. Cade sighed. So what's your plan? Expose him? Bring him down? I met his gaze. I want him buried. A smirk. Now that's something I can work with. The bait Holloway had to believe his plan was still working, that I was either running scared or scrambling for options, so I fed him exactly that. I let word slip through the right channels that I was trying to flee the country. Fake documents, a desperate wire transfer, a last-minute flight booked to a very convenient location. It was enough to make Holloway think he had me. Now, all I had to do was wait. The final meeting. 2 days later, I got the message, a burner phone, a single text. Meet me at the docks. Midnight, it. Wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. Holloway had taken the bait. Cade and I arrived an hour early, setting up. We weren't stupid. We knew Holloway wouldn't come alone, so neither did we. Aaron had worked his magic, feeding information to another interested party, the FBI. By the time Holloway arrived, the docks were crawling with undercover agents. Watching from the shadows, Holloway stepped out of his car, flanked by 2 men. He looked calm, confident. He thought this was the end for me, but he had no idea he was walking into a trap. Checkmate. You've caused me a lot of trouble, Holloway said, his voice smooth, almost amused. I shrugged. You started it. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You should have taken my warning, I smirked. You should have done your homework. His expression flickered just for a second. Then behind him, the first FBI agent stepped out of the shadows. Then another, and another. Holloway tensed. What the hell is this? Cade's voice was cold. This is justice. A moment of silence. Then Holloway lunged for his gun. A gunshot cracked through the air. He staggered, his weapon clattering to the ground. The FBI swarmed in. His men were taken down in seconds, and just like that, it was over. The aftermath, Holloway's entire empire unraveled within days. The evidence we provided led to arrests, corruption charges, investigations that reached higher than I had even imagined. Nathan flipped, cutting a deal. Emily's betrayal? Just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Cade vanished, as expected, but before he left, he handed me a final message. If you ever need someone handled, you know where to find me. I didn't think I'd ever take him up on that offer. But knowing it was there, that was enough. A new beginning. I stood on my balcony, looking over the city. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't being hunted, wasn't running. I had won. And as I took a slow sip of my drink, I smiled, because no matter how deep the betrayal, revenge was always worth the wait. The end. Beneath the Surface. Part 7. Shadows Never Fade. Holloway was gone. His empire had crumbled. His associates were either in handcuffs, dead, or had vanished into the wind. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But peace? Peace was a lie. Because revenge isn't an ending. It's just another door, and behind every door, something waits. An unexpected message. 3 weeks after Holloway's arrest, I received an envelope at my doorstep. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single photograph, a man in a suit, unfamiliar, sitting at a restaurant, a woman next to him. My blood turned to ice, because the woman smiling in that photo was Emily, the deeper game. I stared at the photo, my mind racing. Emily had disappeared after Holloway's downfall. The last I had heard, she had drained a hidden offshore account and vanished, but now she was back, and she wasn't alone. I flipped the photo over. One word was scrawled in red ink. Run. My pulse slowed. My grip on the photo tightened. No, I wasn't running. Not again. A meeting with Aaron met me at a small diner on the outskirts of the city. His expression was grim as he slid his laptop in front of me. I ran facial recognition on the guy in the photo, he said. His name is Thomas Wren, former intelligence officer, but that's not the interesting part. I exhaled slowly. Go on. He's been in business with Holloway for years. Before the FBI cracked down, he was one of the silent partners. That explained a lot, but it didn't explain why Emily was with him, unless… Jesus, Aaron muttered. She's working with him. My jaw clenched. Looks like it. Aaron closed his laptop, rubbing his temples. You sure you want to go down this road again? I smirked. Who said I ever left? Following the trail, it didn't take long to find them. A high-rise hotel, private suite. Heavy security. They weren't hiding. They wanted to be seen, and that meant they were setting something up. Emily had always been a survivor, a manipulator. If she was with Wren, it wasn't just for protection. She was making another play. And this time, she knew exactly what I was capable of, but she had forgotten one thing. I knew her just as well. The confrontation. I walked into the hotel lobby, keeping my head down. A stolen key card got me access to the elevator. The suite was on the 22nd floor. I stepped inside, heart steady, hands in my pockets. Emily was sitting on the couch, swirling a glass of wine. She didn't look surprised. Hello, darling, she murmured. I didn't blink. Cut the act, she smirked. I see you got my message. I tossed the photo onto the table. Who sent it? She glanced at the image, then back at me. Does it matter? Yes. Her eyes studied me. Then, she sighed. Fine. Wren sent it. He wanted to see what you'd do. I clenched my jaw. Why? Emily leaned forward. Because he's offering you a deal. I scoffed. A deal? After everything? She shrugged. You buried Holloway. That left a vacuum. And Wren, well, he's a businessman. I stared at her. And you? Her lips curled. I'm just playing the winning side. Typical. I exhaled. Tell Wren I don't make deals with ghosts. Emily smiled. Oh, sweetheart. Then the door behind me clicked. I turned. Thomas Wren stood there, hands in his pockets, smiling like the devil himself, and just like that, the game wasn't over. It was just beginning to be continued. Beneath the Surface, Part 8, The Next Betrayal. Thomas Wren wasn't just another corporate snake. He was different. He had the air of a man who never raised his voice, because he never had to. And as he stood in that hotel suite smiling like he already knew how this would play out, I understood something. I wasn't dealing with another Holloway. I was dealing with someone worse. A dangerous proposition. Wren gestured to the seat across from Emily. Sit. I didn't move. I'm fine right here, he chuckled. Fair enough. Then he walked past me and poured himself a drink. I imagine you're wondering why I invited you here. Wondering why I haven't put a bullet in you yet, I corrected. Emily smirked, swirling her wine. Same old you, I ignored her. My focus was on Wren. You made a lot of noise taking down Holloway, Wren continued. Big names got caught in the crossfire, powerful people. He turned to face me. Some of them want you dead, but others… A pause. They're impressed. I narrowed my eyes. Get to the point. Wren took a sip of his drink. I want to offer you a job. Silence. Then I laughed. You think I'd work for you? He smiled. I think you're a man who understands leverage, and I happen to have some on you. That wiped the smirk off my face. Emily leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You didn't really think we brought you here just to talk, did you? Wren pulled a phone from his pocket and tossed it onto the table. The screen lit up. Surveillance footage. Aaron, tied to a chair, blood trickling from his temple. A muscle in my jaw twitched. You son of a… Wren raised a hand. Relax. He's alive. A small smile. For now, I clenched my fists. What do you want? Emily leaned back, looking amused. Like he said, we want you to work for us. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. And if I refuse? Ren's smile faded. Then Aaron dies. An impossible choice. I stared at the screen. Aaron had been with me since the beginning. He had risked his life, hacking into Holloway's empire, helping me bring it all down. And now, because of me, he was at their mercy. Ren sipped his drink, watching me. You're not a hero, he said. You don't fight for justice. You fight to win. He gestured to Emily. She understands that. Emily smiled sweetly. I always did. I wanted to put a bullet in both of them. But Aaron didn't have that luxury. Tick-tock. Ren said, What's it going to be? I took a slow breath. Then I met Ren's eyes. I'll do it. Emily's smile widened. Ren clapped his hands together. Smart man. But what they didn't realize, I never planned on playing by their rules. To be continued. Beneath the Surface. Part 9. The Long Con. The moment I said yes, I felt like I had sealed my fate. But what they didn't realize was that I had already been playing a game of my own, one that they weren't even aware of. I wasn't going to work for Ren and Emily. I was going to take them down from the inside. The new mission. The next few days were tense. Ren and Emily were confident, almost arrogant in their assumption that I had bent the knee. They provided me with the details of my first mission, tracking down a high-profile target that was getting too close to their operations. The target had connections to law enforcement and several corporate giants. It was a classic setup. Kill the man, eliminate the evidence, and never speak of it again. But there was a problem. The target was someone I knew. The man's name was Victor. O'Neill, an old contact who had once helped me gather information on Holloway before things had gone south. The man had been deep in corporate circles, and if he was still alive, I knew he'd be useful again. Ren had no idea. They thought they were using me. But in reality, I was using them. Double cross. I went through the motions, meetings with Ren, cold, calculated plans, a false sense of allegiance that I wore like a mask. But beneath it all, I was setting the pieces into place. I made contact with O'Neill, feeding him false intel about an upcoming transaction. I told him to keep his distance from the target, location, but I also planted a few real clues that would lead him to uncover what Ren and Emily were doing. At the same time, I fed misinformation to Ren. Let him believe I was loyal, following his orders to the letter. I'd lie low for a while, allow him to trust me, and when the time was right, I'd strike. But it wasn't just Ren I had to worry about. Emily was sharp. She didn't miss details. Her ability to manipulate and control those around her was lethal. She was always watching. But I had one advantage over her. I knew her weaknesses. The final gamble. The plan had been months in the making. The moment Ren and Emily believed they had fully corralled me into their web, I made my move. I met with O'Neill one last time, telling him to prepare for the final phase. I planted a story, made it look like Ren was going to try and eliminate him after the job was done, but I also made sure that O'Neill wouldn't be the one who took the fall. It was me. I tipped off the FBI to the location, planted the evidence. That would implicate me as the mastermind behind everything. Then I went to see Emily. The showdown. I found her in their shared office, her eyes sharp as ever. You've been quiet, she said, her voice laced with suspicion. Just letting everything fall into place, I replied. She narrowed her eyes. What do you mean by that? I stepped closer. You thought you were the only one playing a game. Her lips curled. I always play the game better. I took a deep breath. This is where you lose. For a second, Emily said nothing. Then she glanced at the window, her expression flickering. Ren told me you were a loose end, but I didn't believe it. You should have, I said. This ends now. Before she could respond, I turned and walked out, knowing she'd. Balo, the trap closes outside. The FBI was moving in. O'Neill was safely in their custody, and the operation was already underway. Wren and Emily would be caught in the web of lies they'd woven for themselves. I didn't even flinch as I heard the sirens closing in. This was my final move. Wren and Emily, with their power, their plans, their dark games, were done. I had set everything up so that they couldn't escape. The aftermath. The following weeks were a blur of investigations, arrests, and a press frenzy. Wren's and Emily's ties to Holloway's empire were exposed in full, revealing not only their illegal dealings but their intricate web of corruption and deceit. And in the end, when the dust settled, there was nothing left for them but the wreckage of their own choices. But for me, I walked away. Not as the man who had been betrayed, but as the one who had finally won. The final twist. Just when I thought I was done with this world, I got another envelope. This one wasn't a photo. It was a letter, sealed with a crimson wax emblem. Opened it carefully. It read, "You may have won this round, but remember, shadows never fade. They only wait for the right moment to return." The signature, a single letter, E, to be continued. Beneath the Surface, Part 10, Shadows Reborn. The letter hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't the kind of thing you ignore, especially not after everything I'd been through. The wax seal was too familiar. It had been a part of Claire's notes, the same symbol she used in the games she played with me before she vanished. And now... E? I leaned back in my chair, the weight of that single letter pressing against me like a ghost from my past. Whoever E was, they were reminding me that this war wasn't over, not by a long shot, the search for E. The days that followed were filled with questions. Was it Emily? She had always been ruthless, but I didn't believe she would have the audacity to come back into the picture after everything had crumbled. No, this felt different. I turned to Aaron. He had been a lifeline, someone I could trust through all the layers of deception and betrayal. But even he was on edge when I showed him the letter. "I thought you got rid of everyone who had the means to hurt you," Aaron said. "Clearly I missed someone." Aaron scanned the letter for any hidden meanings, any clues that might suggest who E was. "It's not Emily," he finally concluded. "This is something deeper. Someone from a place even you haven't touched." I stared at the letter again, thinking. E. It's too deliberate, too simple. It's a signature, not a name. We ran it through every database we could access. But E didn't come up as a name that matched anyone within the sphere of Holloway, Wren, or Emily's associates. But as I sifted through every angle, one name kept whispering at the back of my mind, something from my past. Claire. A return to Sycamore Street. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all connected to Claire. I had been so focused on ending my past with her, on destroying everything she had taken from me, that I hadn't considered how deeply she had rooted herself in the shadows. Sycamore Street. The abandoned warehouse. The place where our story had ended, or so I thought. I drove there. Alone. No backup. No plan. Just the gut instinct that told me I needed answers. As I approached the warehouse, the familiar sense of unease crawled up my spine. The building looked desolate, but something about it felt alive. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing off the concrete. The smell of damp wood and rusted metal filled the air. There was no sign of movement, but I didn't trust that for a second. And then I saw it. A symbol. On the floor, scrawled in chalk. A circle with 3 interlocking triangles, the exact same symbol Claire had once used. She was here. The message left behind. I crouched down, tracing the edges of the symbol with my fingers. And then, As if I had been waiting for it, a soft click rang out in the distance. I froze. A light flickered on in the corner of the warehouse, revealing a hidden room behind a wall of crates. I knew what this was. A trap. But it wasn't for me. It was for whoever was chasing me. I stepped into the room, the dim glow from a single lamp revealing a set of monitors. And in the center, a chair. Empty. I knew I wasn't alone. A voice broke the silence. "Welcome back." I spun around. It was Claire, and standing beside her was someone I hadn't seen in years, Thomas Wren. The truth unveiled. "What is this?" I demanded, heart racing. Claire's smile was cold, distant. "You never truly understood the game, did you? You were a pawn, just like me." Wren's lips curled. "You thought you won." I didn't speak, just clenched my fists. Claire continued, her voice low. "I knew what you were planning all along, but you didn't know what I had been planning. Wren wasn't the real enemy. He was just a tool." Wren stepped forward. "And you were always going to be the one to clean up the mess. Whether you realized it or not, it hit me like a blow to the chest. They had orchestrated the whole thing. From the moment Claire had framed me with the affair and set me on the path to destruction, she had been manipulating every move. Wren was just a small part of her game. I had been played. The betrayal of betrayals, Claire turned to Wren. "You said you'd handle it. I want him broken." I felt the sharpness of her words hit me harder than anything else. She wasn't the person I thought I knew. She was cold, merciless, but I wasn't going to play the victim anymore. Wren stepped toward me. "You think you've outsmarted us?" I shook my head. "No, I know I have." And with that, I made my move. I'd been planning for months, setting up contingencies in case something like this ever happened. Before they could react, I pulled out a device, a signal jammer. The monitors flickered, the cameras went dark. The chaos that followed, I didn't hesitate. The final act, it all came down to this. Claire had underestimated me. She had thought she could control me, keep me tangled in her web. But I was done being a pawn. With the cameras down, I took advantage of the chaos. Wren was still adjusting, his eyes darting from one side of the room to the other, trying to regain control. Beneath the surface, Part 11 reclaiming control. The moment I grabbed Claire's wrist, everything seemed to slow. Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, narrowed, and for a second, I saw the old familiar spark of defiance in them. But something else flickered there, too. Fear. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I realized that I was in control. Wren, still dazed from my move, was struggling to regain his footing. The monitors, still dark, cast eerie shadows around us. But this wasn't the endgame I'd planned. It was just the beginning. The power shifty yanked Claire toward me, her body stiff, resisting. "You never understood me, did you?" I whispered. "I'm not the man you think I am. Not anymore." Her lips curled into a sneer, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. She was trying to calculate her next move, weighing whether to talk her way out of this or take another stab at me. But I knew something she didn't. Her game was over. I pushed her against the wall. "You were right about one thing. You've been controlling every move for years. But now it's my turn." I turned my attention to Wren, who was recovering his bearings. He was more dangerous now, enraged, but he was no match for the preparation I'd put in place. I had known that Claire would have a backup plan. I had known that Wren would play his part like a puppet, but I had never truly underestimated them, just manipulated them into thinking they had the upper hand. Revealing the truth, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out a small device. Wren's eyes widened in recognition. "Impossible," he muttered. "You never thought I'd be smart enough to backtrack on your steps," I said, activating the device. The entire building shook as the emergency alarms blared to life. Every exit was sealed. There was no way out. "You think you can escape now?" I asked, turning back to Claire. For the first time in months, she hesitated. "I gave you everything," she spat. "And you still think you can control this?" I smiled coldly. "I didn't control anything until now. You did. Too much. And now, it's over." With that, I sent a signal to the authorities, triggering the alert system I had planted days ago at the collapse. The police were already en route, but I wasn't leaving anything to chance. I had planted enough evidence to tie Ren and Claire directly to their operations. Their entire network, everything they'd built, was crumbling before. Ren lunged at me, but I was ready. A few moves, a quick counterattack, and I had him pinned. He gasped for breath, his struggle futile. He was just another man who had underestimated me. "Game over," I muttered. Claire watched, her face blank, as if she couldn't believe it was happening. But there was no escape for her now. "You'll be going down with him," I said, my voice dark. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Claire hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won? You'll never escape the mess I've left behind." I leaned in closer. "You're the one who left the mess. I'm just cleaning it up." The unexpected twist. But just as I thought it was all coming to a close, a voice crackled over the intercom, one I hadn't expected to hear. "Not so fast, my friend." I turned to the source, the surprise sending a chill through me. It wasn't Ren. It wasn't even Claire. It was someone else entirely. I hadn't noticed the figure entering the room. A tall, lean man dressed in black, his face obscured by a mask. "I see you've been busy," he said, his voice smooth and calm, almost amused. I froze. Who was this? Claire's face twisted into a scowl. "How did you—" The masked man ignored her, his attention on me. "You've come far, but this is where your plan ends." Before I could respond, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone had brought him here, someone who had been working behind the scenes this entire time. The reveal. The room grew colder as the masked man stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not here to kill you." I exhaled, trying to steady my nerves. "Then what the hell do you want?" "I'm here to offer you a choice," he said, his voice still impossibly calm. "You can walk away now, forget everything, or—" I heard the soft click of a gun's safety being turned off. I didn't hesitate. "Or what?" The man's laugh echoed in the darkness. "Or you can die right here, right now." I stood my ground, not giving an inch. "What's your game?" "I don't play games. I just clean up other people's messes," he replied. Then it hit me. The symbol. The masked man. I knew exactly who he was. This wasn't over. This was just beginning, to be continued. Beneath the surface. Part 12. The Masked Truth. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could feel the cold barrel of the gun pointed at me. But the man's voice, calm, measured, was what truly sent a shiver down my spine. His presence, hidden behind the mask, was unsettling, like an invisible force had swept into the room, taking control in ways I hadn't anticipated. I held my ground, refusing to give in to the pressure. "So, you clean up messes?" I said, narrowing my eyes. "Who do you work for? Why the theatrics?" The masked man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, the soft creak of his boots against the concrete floor echoing in the darkened room. "I work for the ones who don't want their names mentioned," he said slowly, almost to himself. "And the theatrics? Well, that's just for fun." I didn't know whether to laugh or take him seriously. Everything had been unraveling at an alarming pace, and now I was face to face with an unknown entity who seemed to hold all the power. The hidden hand Claire, still standing near the wall, stared at the masked man, her eyes wide with realization. You. It's you, isn't it? The masked man chuckled softly. Did you really think you were the only one with friends in high places, Claire? The way he said her name sent an eerie chill through the air, and I saw the brief flicker of fear in her eyes, something I had never expected from her. You've been playing both sides this whole time, she spat, her voice low but laced, with venom. I should have known. Claire wasn't as composed as she tried to appear. She was unraveling, just as the entire web of deceit around us was. But the man, this masked figure, was the key to everything. I needed answers. What is it you want from me? I demanded, my voice steady but with an edge. Why interfere now when I've already beaten Claire and Wren? He tilted his head slightly, a gesture I could feel even though his face was hidden. Beating them. He scoffed. You think it's over? You're still a pawn in someone else's game just like Claire was. The twist eye took a step back, absorbing his words, feeling the weight of them settle over me. So you're telling me you were always the one pulling the strings? I asked, the realization hitting me hard. Not always, he said, but now I am. And you? You're just one more piece that needs to be put in its place. Suddenly the room grew colder, as if a switch had been flipped. My instincts told me that this was something far bigger than just Claire, Wren, and me. The masked man's voice softened. You've been so caught up in your revenge, so focused on destroying everything around you, that you've missed the bigger picture. You've missed the fact that you're the one who's been manipulated from the start. I gritted my teeth. And what do you expect me to do now? Exactly what you've been trained to do, he replied, stepping closer. Finish what you started, but this time for the right reasons. His words hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt my pulse quicken. The right reasons. That was the final piece of the puzzle I hadn't accounted for. The offer. The masked man stepped closer, the gun lowered but still within reach. His eyes were hidden behind the mask, but his voice was enough to send a shiver down my spine. You've been played, just like Claire. You've been caught in a web of lies, and now I'm offering you a choice. I didn't say a word. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. Kill me, he continued, his voice growing colder. Finish me, and you'll be free. You'll be rid of all of this. Or, he paused for effect, letting the tension simmer. You can walk away. Take everything. All of it. The power, the money, everything Claire and Wren worked so hard to build. I stared at him, speechless. This was the moment. A choice between power and revenge, between walking away or fully claiming my place in a world I had tried to escape. You're offering me everything I wanted all along? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Not everything, the masked man corrected, but everything that matters. The decision, I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of his offer, pressing down on me like a heavy stone. The gun, the mask, Claire's terrified gaze, it all swirled together in a dizzying haze. But deep down, I knew what had to be done. Power had never been my goal. Revenge had been a fleeting thing, something that felt righteous but hollow in the end. What I wanted, what I truly wanted, was closure, justice, and above all, control over my own fate. I choose to walk away, I said, my voice steady, the final reveal. The masked man seemed to consider my words for a moment, then slowly, deliberately, removed his mask. I stared in shock, as the face that stared back at me was one I hadn't seen in years. It was David Mercer. Surprised? He asked with a smirk. I took a step back, the shock rippling through me. You were behind it all? David chuckled softly. I never left. I was always here, watching. Beneath the Surface. Part 13, The Aftermath. It had been a month since everything unraveled. The dust had settled, and with it a strange emptiness filled the void that had once been filled with anger, betrayal, and revenge. I had closed that chapter of my life, but the echoes still lingered in the corners of my mind. The faces of Claire and David Mercer, the lies, the manipulation, it was all behind me, but the scars would never fully fade. I stood by the window of my new apartment. The city sprawled out beneath me, its lights flickering like distant stars. Life had continued. The world had moved on, but I remained tethered to the choices I'd made. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. The hunger for vengeance had consumed me, but now that it was over, I was left with the question, what now? The weight of freedom. I had everything I thought I wanted. The peace, the closure, the knowledge that I had taken control. But now that I had it, I realized I had sacrificed a part of myself in the process. I had become someone I barely recognized. A man capable of calculating every move, of turning every corner of my life into a chessboard. As the days passed, I found myself wondering if this was all there was. Was the victory really worth it? I had dismantled their empire, but in doing so I had lost something more important. I had lost the man I used to be, the one who still believed in love, trust, and innocence. That version of myself felt like a distant memory, slipping further away with each passing day. Unexpected visit one afternoon, as I returned from a walk. I found a letter waiting for me on the kitchen counter. It was handwritten, an odd detail in the age of digital communication. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name scrawled in a familiar script. I opened it carefully, reading the words slowly. I know who you are now, and I know what you've done, but in the end, you're still just a pawn, just like the rest of us. Don't think you've won. There's always a bigger game, and you're just one piece in it. Watch your back, S. I stood there, the paper crumpling in my hand as the weight of the message settled in. The letter was from someone I didn't know, but they knew me. The return of the game. The feeling of paranoia I had long buried came rushing back with a vengeance. The quiet, the peace I had fought so hard to attain. Was it all just another illusion? The letter wasn't the end. It was a warning, a sign that the game was far from over. Someone else was pulling strings from the shadows, and I was right back where I started, being watched. I had thought I was free, but it was clear now that freedom had never been part of the deal. A new investigation. I couldn't sit idly by. If someone was out there, if someone was watching me, then I needed to find out who they were. I needed answers. I hired an investigator, someone I could trust. This wasn't the first time I'd been forced into this kind of game. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't chasing down a wife's betrayal or a lover's secret. This time, I was chasing down a ghost. The investigator got to work, following every lead, checking the network of people I had dealt with over the last few months. But every lead came up dry. No fingerprints, no names, just dead ends. It was as though whoever had sent the letter had already covered their tracks. The return of Claire one evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I received an unexpected knock at the door. I opened it cautiously, my heart racing. Standing there, looking as composed as ever, was Claire. I didn't know how to react. After everything, after the lies, the betrayal, her alliance with Mercer, I had expected her to vanish into the shadows. But here she was, standing in front of me like a ghost from the past. You, I began, but my voice faltered. She gave a small, bitter smile. I know you didn't expect to see me again. I was silent, trying to piece together why she was here, what game she was playing. I've come to tell you something, she said, her voice low. You thought it was over, that we were finished, but the truth is, I've never been the real enemy. Her words sent a chill down my spine. What are you talking about? I demanded. I've been keeping tabs on you. I had no choice. I knew someone would eventually come for you. She paused, her eyes hardening. The game's far, bigger than just you and me. There's a whole network, one that you've only just started to understand. My blood ran cold. More of them? I'm not the one who sent the letter, she added, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. But they're getting closer. The final move? I didn't know if I could trust Claire. After everything she had done, after how thoroughly she'd broken me, I couldn't believe a word she said. But something in her eyes, the way she spoke, made me think she was telling the truth. I was being drawn into something even bigger than I had ever imagined. The question now wasn't just about revenge or betrayal, it was about survival. Beneath the Surface, Part 14, The Echoes of Shadows. The words Claire spoke hung in the air, thick with menace. She wasn't here to apologize, to make amends. She was here with a warning, and the implications of her revelation were enough to send a shiver down my spine. They're closer than you think, she repeated, her voice tinged with something unfamiliar. Guilt? Fear? It was hard to tell. I couldn't get out. But you still have a chance. I stepped back, my mind racing. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. What are you talking about? What game? Claire's eyes darted around the room, as if checking for anyone else. There was no one there, just the two of us in this cold, sterile apartment. But I could feel the weight of something more. Something I wasn't fully seeing yet. You've been too focused. On the small picture, Claire continued, lowering her voice. You think you were being used by David Mercer, but he's just a player in a much bigger scheme. A scheme that involves people far more dangerous than him. You have no idea how deep this goes. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. Tell me everything, Claire, now. She hesitated, biting her lip before speaking again. You've been followed, watched. Someone close to you has been feeding information to them. The shock of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Who? But Claire shook her head, the faintest hint of sorrow in her eyes. I don't know. But I do know they've been waiting for you to make a move. They'll be watching everything you do now. I could feel the familiar pressure of paranoia creeping back into my mind. Who could it be? Wren? The investigator I'd hired? Someone from my past I hadn't even considered? I'm not your enemy anymore, Claire said, her voice breaking slightly. I'm not working with them. I've been trying to get out of it for months, but they have too many eyes, too many hands in too many places. I stared at her, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. Had she been telling me the truth? Was she just trying to manipulate me again? I don't believe you, I said, the words sharp. You were always the one pulling the strings, Claire. You've been lying to me since the beginning. She flinched at the accusation, but then she straightened, her expression hardening. Maybe. But this time I'm telling you the truth. A dangerous game. The next few days were a blur of restless nights, secret meetings, and half-baked plans. I couldn't ignore what Claire had said. The possibility that someone else was pulling the strings, that they had been watching me all along, gnawed at my mind. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to go after the source. I reached out to the investigator again, but his responses were strangely evasive. He claimed to have found nothing new, no leads to follow. It felt off, too clean, too neat. Then I started noticing strange things. My phone was acting weird. Glitches in the messages I received, numbers that didn't match up. My car was being parked differently, and I noticed someone had moved an item on my desk. Small things, but enough to make my skin crawl. The realization hit me hard. Someone was in my life, watching, and I was too slow to catch them. They knew my every move, and they weren't just waiting. They were preparing. A hidden connection. It wasn't until I started digging into the people I had crossed. In the past, those who had seemed insignificant at the time, that I found the first real lead, a name, tucked away in a forgotten file. Elliot Vance. The name rang a bell. He was a corporate fixer, someone Claire had mentioned briefly in passing during our investigation. But there was more to him than that. He had a reputation for working with people in the shadows, people who wanted things done quietly without a trace. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Claire's betrayal, Mercer's involvement, and now Vance, a man who was skilled at making things disappear. I had to find him. The encounter I tracked Elliot Vance down to a small, nondescript office building on the outskirts of the city. His reputation preceded him, and though he was skilled at keeping a low profile, it didn't take much to locate his hideout. I stood outside the building, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the confrontation I had been dreading. Not just with Claire, not with Mercer, but with someone who had been playing the long game all along. As I entered the building, the air seemed thicker, the silence heavier. It was the kind of place that made you question every move, every breath. And then I saw him, Elliot Vance. He was sitting at a desk, surrounded by papers, his sharp eyes locked on me as I stepped into the room. There was no surprise in his expression, just a knowing glance. He had been expecting me. "Did you think you could get away?" he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. "You've been tangled in this web for too long to walk away now." I didn't say anything. Beneath the Surface, Part 15, The Reckoning. I walked out of that room, my decision made. The weight of it pressed on my shoulders, but it felt different now, lighter, as if I had shed a layer of skin I didn't even know I was wearing. The door closed behind me, and I could almost hear the echo of my footsteps as I stepped back into the world. The quiet hum of the city greeted me, and for a moment I thought I might finally be free. But freedom, as I was learning, wasn't so easily earned. The unexpected visitor, it had been 2 days since my encounter with Vance. I thought I had shaken the worst of it. Walked away, made my choice, moved on. But the universe doesn't let you walk away from things so easily, not when they've been lurking in the shadows for so long. The knock on my door came when I least expected it. I wasn't ready. The quiet buzz of my phone moments before felt like a prelude to something worse, a warning I'd missed. I opened the door slowly, cautiously, as if bracing for something unknown. Standing on the other side was someone I never thought I would see again, Sophia. I stared at her, dumbfounded. It was a jolt to my system, a reminder of everything I'd tried to forget. The face of the woman who had helped me piece my life together after the wreckage of my past. My confidant, the one person I thought had my back. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" I managed to say, the words thick with confusion. Her eyes darted around nervously, and she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tense. I wasn't sure if I was angry or just surprised. "Talk about what?" I replied, my words hardening. "I found something," she said, pulling out a small envelope from her bag. "You need to see this." I took the envelope from her, not knowing what to expect, but as I opened it, my breath caught in my chest. Inside was a single photograph, a photo of me standing outside Vance's office building taken from a distance. "How did you?" I began, but the words caught in my throat. Sophia stepped back, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't know who else to turn to. I had to come clean. I've been keeping something from you." The deeper connection. Her confession hit harder than any blow I'd ever felt. She had known more about the game than she had ever let on. "Thought I could protect you," she continued, her voice soft but filled with regret. "I tried to keep you away from it, but it's too deep. I didn't want to involve you in any of this, but I couldn't stop it. The network, the people behind all of this, They've been watching both of us. They always knew. The world felt like it was tilting, everything around me spinning. My mind raced to process her words. Sophia had been involved? Had she been playing me all along? What do you mean they knew? Who are they? I demanded, my voice suddenly desperate. She looked away as if afraid to make eye contact. The people you've been running from. Vance, Claire, the whole system they built. They've been pulling your strings, manipulating everything in your life, and I was part of it. I could barely comprehend what she was saying. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a sharp reminder that the world I thought I knew was a lie. I didn't have a choice, Sophia whispered. I thought I could protect you from the worst of it. I thought you could walk away, but they won't let you. They won't let either of us. The twist no one saw coming. I was reeling, but something inside me snapped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a violation of everything I had worked for. Sophia, the one person I thought was truly on my side, had been part of the machine I'd been fighting all along, but there was something else. Something about her fear. The way her eyes darted to the door as if she expected someone else to walk in at any moment. The network is much bigger than just Vance and Claire, she said, her voice shaking now. They're everywhere. And now that you've taken a step toward Vance, they'll come for you. And for me. My mind was spinning. What did she mean by they? Before I could respond, there was another knock on the door. This time it wasn't just a casual tap. It was forceful, insistent. Sophia's face drained of color. She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the back door. We don't have time, she hissed. They're here. I didn't think. I just followed, adrenaline pumping in my veins as we hurried to the back exit. We didn't speak as we sprinted through the alleyways, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us. It felt like we were running from ghosts, people who knew everything about us, and yet we knew nothing about them. The unseen hand as we reached the edge of the alley. I heard voices behind us, too close. They were getting louder, closer. Sophia's grip on my arm tightened, her desperation growing. There's a safe house, she said. We need to get there before they catch up. I didn't hesitate. I knew what was at stake. I wasn't just running from Vance anymore. Beneath the surface, Part 17, the ghost from the past. The figure in the doorway was shrouded in a dark silhouette, but even in the dim light, I knew who it was. My heart sank. Claire, the woman who had once been my wife, the woman whose betrayal had shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. The room seemed to freeze, the air thick with disbelief. Sophia tensed beside me, her face pale, eyes wide in shock. Vance, on the other hand, looked eerily calm, almost pleased. Claire, I managed to say, the name escaping my lips like an accusation. What the hell are you doing here? She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a calculated coldness. She didn't look like the same woman I once shared my life with. This Claire was different, hardened, sharp, a version of herself that had clearly learned how to survive in the world of shadows. I think the question is, she said, her voice smooth and low, what are you doing here? I felt a wave of anger rise, but I pushed it down, forcing myself to stay in control. I had already gone through hell to get to this point, and I couldn't afford to let emotions cloud my judgment now. Vance, I said, turning to him, you knew she was still involved, didn't you? Vance's eyes flickered for a moment, his lips curling into a slight grin. I didn't know for sure, but I had my suspicions. Claire and I have history. We've worked together before. The words hung in the air, their implications sinking in slowly. Claire and Vance, had they been working? Together all along? Had she been playing me from the very beginning? Why, Claire? I asked, the question coming out in a rasp. Why come back now? After everything? She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle she was enjoying piecing together. You think I've been playing you? No, darling. I was just a part of the plan. Just one piece in a much bigger game. And right now, you've finally outlived your usefulness. Sophia took a step back, her face stricken with disbelief. You've been in on this the whole time? You were working with the network? Claire's gaze shifted to Sophia, and a cold smile formed on her lips. Oh, sweetie, you don't know half of it. But you will. You see, you've all made a very dangerous mistake. The network doesn't forgive those who step out of line. I clenched my fists, a surge of fury rising in my chest. So this was all just a game to you, to both of you? Claire's eyes never wavered from mine. No, it wasn't a game. It was survival. And you should have known better than to think you could take on the network. You think you can destroy us? You don't even know the half of it. The betrayal unfolds. I could feel the pieces clicking together in my mind. But there was still one thing that didn't make sense. How? How had I fallen into this trap? I don't understand, I said, my voice low but steady. You had everything. Why destroy? Me? Why ruin everything we had? Claire's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. I didn't ruin anything you did. You got in the way. You thought you could expose the network, disrupt their plans. But now it's too late. You've made your move, and now you'll pay the price. Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. You've been using him this whole time, haven't you? Lying, manipulating, playing him like a fool. For what? Power, revenge. Claire's eyes flickered to Sophia, a brief moment of acknowledgement, before she turned back to me. You really think I did all of this for power? No. It was never about you, or even about me. It was always about control. The network controls everything, everyone. And now you've opened the door for them. I glanced at Sophia, then back at Claire and Vance, trying to piece together the puzzle. They'd been lying to me from the beginning, manipulating every step I'd taken. But why had Claire come back now? What had changed? What's the next move? I demanded. What do you want from me now? Claire's eyes darkened. It's simple. You're going to disappear. All of you are going to disappear. And once we've dealt with you, the network will move in, making sure no one can stop them. The chill in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. Disappear? Vance stepped forward now, his gaze locked on me. It's over. You can't win this. But I'll tell you what, I'll make it quick. A favor for an old friend. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The past few months had led to this moment, the moment where the lies, betrayals, and secrets were all exposed in one ruthless sweep. But there was something else simmering beneath the surface, something I hadn't counted on. Sophia. She had been at the center of this all along. But what was her true role in all of this? Was she an ally? Or had she been a player in their game? From the beginning, setting me up for a fall? Before I could ask, I felt a sharp, cold pressure on the back of my neck. I turned, and there he was, David Mercer. Beneath the Surface, Part 18, The Final Deception. The room went silent as I stared at David Mercer, standing there like a ghost from my past, his presence both unsettling and unexpected. He'd once been a shadow at the edge of my life, a man who had helped destroy it without ever fully understanding the consequences. And now, here he was, in the heart of the storm, aligned with Claire and the network. I didn't think you'd be involved, I said, my voice cold, betrayed by the bitterness that rose in my chest. But then again, nothing about this situation has been what it seems. Mercer didn't flinch. His face was like stone, betraying no emotion, no remorse. But there was something in his eyes, something almost resigned, as though he knew I was the last piece of the puzzle he needed to deal with. It wasn't personal, he said quietly, his voice low but steady. It was always about survival. We all make choices, and sometimes those choices lead us down paths we can't return from. I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening at my sides. You're telling me this was all about survival? I scoffed. You've destroyed lives for that? You've been part of the plan to break me, to break us. Claire's lips curled into a smirk. That's the game, isn't it? You don't get to play without losing something, but now you've come too far, and there's no way back. You should have stayed out of it, stayed out of our way. But there was something off about their unity, something in the way they were, looking at each other like they were waiting for something or someone, as though this whole encounter had been orchestrated for a reason, and I was merely a piece in their greater scheme. I glanced at Sophia. She had been eerily silent, her eyes darting from one figure to the next, her face pale. She seemed like a shadow of the woman I thought I knew. You knew, didn't you? I said, turning to her. You knew Mercer was involved. You knew Claire was part of the network. Sophia hesitated, her gaze falling to the ground. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. They threatened me. I thought if I just played along, kept you in the dark, it would all be over. But it's not. It's too late now. They're coming for us all. The weight of her words crashed down on me. Too late. That was what Claire had been trying to say all along. We had all been caught in a web we couldn't escape from. I felt a sickening realization settle in my chest. Claire and Mercer hadn't just been working together. They were part of something far larger, something I could barely comprehend. The network had been watching us from the start, guiding us to this exact moment, the twist that changes everything, and then it hit me. The one thing that had been nagging at the back of my mind, the thing I had ignored because I thought I could control it all, was that I had been a pawn. From the very beginning, I had underestimated the lengths to which Claire and the network had gone to manipulate me. I could feel the pieces shifting, but something didn't add up. There was a tension in the air, a change in the way they were standing. It wasn't just Claire and Mercer who were in control anymore. I was being played. I looked at Sophia again, her expression unreadable now. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was more involved than I had originally thought. And then, it clicked. Sophia, I said, my voice rising with realization. You've been feeding them information. You've been working with them the whole time. Her eyes widened, but it was too late for her to deny it. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling. But they threatened me too. I didn't have a choice. I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark, but I was wrong. Now, it's too late. I took a step back, feeling the weight of her words crashing down. Too late. The same phrase that Claire had used. It felt like everything was spiraling, the walls closing in around me. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for. One thing they didn't know about me. I wasn't done yet. The final move. As the room filled with silence, I made my move. My hand shot out, grabbing the flash drive from the table where it had been resting. They had thought they were in control, that they had me right where they wanted me. But what they didn't know was that I had planted a trap of my own. You think you've won, don't you? I said, my voice steady now, despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. You think you can just walk away from this with everything you've done. Mercer's expression didn't change. It's over. There's no turning back for you now, I smirked, holding up the flash drive. You're wrong, because while you've been busy playing your game, I've been collecting everything I need to bring you down. The network won't stop at anything to protect their secrets. But I've got their names, their accounts, and their dirty little deals. And guess what? They're all going public.